Hello, everybody. How are we doing? Are we ready and raring to go for the Japanese Grand Prix? My goodness me, it feels early. It's not actually that early. It's not like ridiculously early. It just feels early. And it always feels this case for the Japanese Grand Prix, although I do appreciate that I'm very, very lucky living in the UK that a lot of the Grand Prix are at pretty decent times for me. And there are a lot of people around the world that have to get up at crazy, crazy times to watch the Grand Prix. In particular, qualifying though this morning, and I'm just getting my stream set up for myself so I can see it. I haven't seen too much of the practices, I'm going to be honest. Quite busy yesterday, and then I did not get up at 3 a.m. this morning to watch free practice 3 because free practice 3 is the most boring practice. It gives us absolutely nothing really because the car's pretty much set up from Friday practice. The teams just kind of give it a little bit of a once around, make sure that the car's running properly in FP3, maybe do some race runs occasionally. But I did see that Max Verstappen absolutely rattling it round once again. He is going to be quick in Suzuka. You know, he's had enough of one weekend not winning a Grand Prix. He's not going to let that happen again, I don't think. I think it's going to be a Max Verstappen show that we are about to witness. Happy midnight from Canada. I don't know if I'd prefer that actually. Like a really late race as opposed to a really early race. It feels like a bit of a weird thing to watch a Grand Prix and then go to bed though. That does seem strange to me. Although again, probably the norm for a lot of Formula One fans out there, where they wind down with a Formula One race at the end of the day. It doesn't feel like a very wind down activity, does it? Literally watching one of the most ridiculous motorsports that are out there, cars going wheel to wheel. So it's not very relaxing a lot of the time. Unless it's somewhere like Monaco where you can just kind of watch them go around and count them like sheep. I feel like that would be quite relaxing. Just watching the cars round and round and round and disappearing off. All right, shall we have a little look at some predictions then? As I said, I feel like Max Verstappen's probably going to bounce back this weekend and be pretty quick. Pretty quick this weekend, Max Verstappen. But a few people went the other way. I also really like the look of the McLaren this weekend. I think the Ferrari might be really good as well. Like, the Ferrari just seems to have bounced back completely. Like, that front wing update, since they've had that front wing update, my goodness me, they just look really, really solid, the Ferrari team. And I know that it's sort of not about this year for Ferrari anymore. They've even said that they're focusing a lot of their efforts on the 2024 car at this point. But they seem to have found a little bit of form in 2023. Most Euro races are on at 6, 7 a.m. I'll take a late Saturday night over an early morning. Yeah, see, it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? Would you prefer an early morning or a late night? I feel like, yeah, I'm the same. I'd probably take a late night Grand Prix over an early morning Grand Prix personally. But yeah, as I was saying, I feel like we could see Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren podium today. I feel like that could definitely occur because all three of them just look ridiculously quick right now. And then you could throw in maybe a Mercedes in there. I know that they've struggled a little bit in comparison, but if you think about it, oh, hello. Uh, well, this is good. I can't open my stream for the qualifying. Let's see if we can fix that by the time we actually get underway in like 5 minutes. Oh dear. I have to like Maybe I can watch it on my phone. Can I put it on my phone? It's just not happening. What has today become? Anyway, I asked you guys for some of your predictions. Alvaro said Ocon, Verstappen, Perez. I do like Alpine this weekend as well. Alpine, this track should suit Alpine fairly well, considering where they were over the last couple of weekends. Although Ocon, so unlucky in Singapore, like ridiculously unlucky in Singapore to get that gearbox issue when he was going really well. Was basically set to finish best of the rest. Pierre Gasly finished 6th in the end. You'd imagine Ocon would have finished just ahead of his teammate, so would have probably taken that 6th place from Pierre. And then Sebastian said Verstappen, Norris, Piastri. That is a heavily McLaren-based podium, which I will definitely take if it's on the cards. But I don't know if both McLarens can be on there. Best drive, Piastri as well. I would absolutely love to see Piastri get a podium in his rookie season. Just like another accolade to kind of add to his career so far that has just been winning every single series that he's been in until this point to get himself up into Formula One. Reese says Stroll, Albon, Alonso. Aston Martin, a little bit of a comeback. I'm not sure Stroll is the driver that I would have gone for at the Aston Martin team to win the Grand Prix if Aston Martin suddenly become competitive. But I appreciate you're still respecting the Aston Martin hype train. He's gone back to Qatar. He's watched the Qatar Grand Prix and he's like, no, sorry, he's gone back to Bahrain. So back to Bahrain. He's watched Bahrain. He's like, God, they were quick, weren't they? They're the second quickest team. And then Jamie as well went for Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris, best drive, Albon, struggle, Haas. Okay. Best team, Ferrari as well. Okay, so a bit of a mix there. Lots of people Ferrari, McLaren heavy, Verstappen obviously in there as well, and then the occasional little bit of a spice with a Williams or an Aston Martin thrown in there. No Mercedes. I don't think anybody has got a Mercedes anywhere near the podium, actually, no. Or in their good teams or bad teams. So everyone just thinking Mercedes is going to have a very bland weekend, which I think George Russell would definitely take after last week and what happened. I think he'd take a bland weekend with George Russell. It's just like, you know what, I'll just take doing okay and no better than okay. Here we go then. Shall we get prepared for qualifying? A couple of minutes to go. Let me get the qualifying board loaded up. Ready to go. Oh, I do love the Suzuka track as well. The Japanese fans do look like a very solid Formula One fan base, don't they? As just considering like there's never been like an insanely quick Japanese driver. Is there one I'm missing? The one that always comes to mind for me is Kamui Kobayashi. Maybe I'm missing someone who was better than Kamui. But he just seems to come to mind to me as like the best Japanese driver so far. He wasn't like ridiculously quick. He was alright. Don't get me wrong. But he wasn't the craziest speed demon that there is. Oh yeah, we haven't mentioned that at all. The fact that Red Bull can be constructors champions this weekend. So Red Bull just have to finish with more than 309 points a gap to the next best team. Currently, that's the drivers. Currently, they have a 307 point gap. So they just have to beat Mercedes by 1 point. and I think not be outscored by Ferrari by 24, 25 points. So basically, Red Bull Constructors' Championship basically locked up as long as they don't have a ridiculously bad weekend and lose out to McLaren. Lose out to Mercedes once again. They did. Oh no, did they lose out to Mercedes in the end? Because obviously George Russell missing out on those points. Oh no, because Perez didn't get in the points in Singapore, did he? So they would have just missed out in terms of points to Mercedes, which is pretty crazy. Lance Stroll straight out onto the track, instantly disappears out of the garage for Aston Martin. Let's get the quali board. Having a little look. Liam Lawson also out of the pits off the bat. Everybody else still waiting just a little while. Carlos Sainz has been absolutely ridiculously quick since the summer break. I am very much looking forward to seeing what Carlos Sainz can do this weekend after winning in Singapore. Liam Lawson, though, out on track, just making his way around the S's up the hill through that first sector. It is an amazing Formula One track, isn't it? A little bit of a weird one. You don't really think of it as a figure of eight, just because you only really see the crossover at this point here where they duck underneath the third sector through the tiniest of tunnels and then up towards the hairpin. It is a real mix of like super high speed corners and ridiculously hard slow speed corners as well. Ah, yeah, Sato in the early 90s. You're right, you're right. That is, oh yeah, the news that AlphaTauri have confirmed Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo for the 2024 season. I made a little video towards the middle of the week, kind of thinking about the ups and downs of each driver pairing and whether Liam Lawson has done enough realistically to actually take one of those seats off Daniel Ricciardo or Yuki Tsunoda. And to be fair, I kind of landed on the fact that I think Daniel Ricciardo was absolutely guaranteed a seat. And then the other seat was sort of Yuki versus Lawson, depending on how much the team really wanted to keep Yuki around. But I think they've made the right decision there. Kept Yuki, kept Ricciardo, and then Lawson maybe will be looked at by Williams as a Logan Sargent replacement. Again, I think it's I'm doubtful of that. Just because I think they will try and stick with Logan Sargent for as long as possible, especially considering this year's only his rookie year. But I think that is a shame for Lawson. He has shown so much character in these last couple of Grand Prix weekends. He's had such tricky races in front of him, and he's performed at every single one of them. So you can't really fault him too much. What's the weather looking like? Completely clear at this moment in time. I think it's very, very unlikely to rain this weekend in Suzuka from what I've seen. But then the weather radar is always up in the air as to what might actually happen. We saw absolutely torrential rain last year, obviously, in Japan. But on board with Liam Lawson, though. As he completes his first flying lap of the Suzuka Circuit. 131.7 kind of sets the standard. AlphaTauri should have picked up Lawson instead of Yuki. I don't know. I feel like, yeah, as much as that would be annoying. I feel like they're just desperate to keep Daniel Ricciardo. So it makes sense that Daniel Ricciardo was like the guaranteed one. Whereas Yuki Tsunoda maybe was the one under a little bit more pressure. But if you think about Yuki so far this season, actually it's been pretty good. I feel like Yuki Tsunoda always starts off the season a lot better. Maybe that's just the AlphaTauri car, though. The AlphaTauri car kind of starts off better. Because I remember saying a similar sort of thing last year. Where I was like, oh, wow, Yuki Tsunoda has started 2022 ridiculously well. And then come 2023, we were saying the same thing. It was like 7, 8 races in. We were like, Yuki Tsunoda has started the year really well. Like, he's finished 11th or 10th. Basically every single Grand Prix. And it's like, maybe Yuki Tsunoda's doing enough this year to show a little bit more. And then it kind of turned into, hasn't quite done enough to take that Red Bull seat. And then it became, maybe he gets replaced by a rookie. So that would be very Red Bull, wouldn't it? Just to chuck Yuki Tsunoda under the bus. Take that away from him. Stroll was actually quicker in the first sector, which is interesting. Liam Lawson, though, quicker in the second and third sector in the AlphaTauri. Don't know how forgiving the Aston Martin is on this track in terms of pace, though. But we are now seeing some of the big boys taking part. Max Verstappen out on track, goes purple in that first sector. 31.228 from Max Verstappen. Going very quick indeed is the current world champion. Can't become world champion this weekend after Singapore, unfortunately for him. Obviously became world champion in Japan last year, but can make it almost guaranteed in Qatar. Daniel Ricciardo for stability, Lawson for future. That is fair. Is it nighttime for me? Sound a bit sleepy. I mean, that is fair. I was in London yesterday. And the train home didn't actually get in until 1 a.m. and then set up the stream, had to get up at 6 a.m. So I'm on 5 hours sleep, which is actually all right, isn't it? It's not like 2 or 3. I've been on less sleep, but yeah, it is an earlier one for me. Also, I don't want to wake up the neighbours, you know. So keep the noise down just a touch, just a touch. Yuki's a good driver, but I don't think he's supported by a Red Bull and helmet. No, that is true. It does feel like he is kind of giving a lot and not really getting much back from the Red Bull system, Yuki Tsunoda. I feel like Yuki is one of those drivers that will eventually move on to another team on the grid. I don't know who that will be. Everyone says Aston Martin, obviously, because they've got Honda coming in. But Lance Stroll is just going to be there for as long as he really wants. And Lance Stroll's still young. I think Lance Stroll's like 24, 25 years old. It's just because he's been around for so long that... Oh, Lando Norris goes second quickest. Sergio Perez third. Russell and Hamilton, both Mercedes slotting in there. Although Russell and Hamilton not super quick in any particular sector. Russell third quickest in the second sector is the best one for Mercedes. But then Russell 11th quickest in the first sector. So maybe those slower speed corners kind of working better for the Mercedes car this weekend. Little replay of Max Verstappen to get a little bit wide. Just a touch. A little bit of bouncing up and down on the curbs for Max Verstappen, but nothing crazy to talk about there in that replay. Norris quickest in the first sector, just by a touch, but Max Verstappen still quicker in the second and third sector, puts him top of the timing sheets. We are only looking for our bottom 5. There is a yellow flag. Oh, no. There is a Williams in the wall. And I think, I don't know which Williams that is at all. They haven't zoomed in. Is Logan Sargent. I mean, if you were going to guess, which of the Williams cars it was going to be. He'd have probably gone for the American. That is going to be a red flag and a big shunt for Logan Sargent. He gets out of the car. He seems okay. He's going to wander across the track. Probably not the best idea in the world. But he's just by the pit lane entry. It's the final corner where Logan Sargent seems to have lost it. Got into the gravel. Has put his Williams car into the wall. And the Williams team head in hands as they realise they're going to have a big job putting that Williams car back together again before the Grand Prix tomorrow. That's going to be Logan Sargent as one of our 5 drivers that are eliminated from Q1 once again. Logan Sargent really not helping his cause, is he? Really not helping his cause. And I think you can see the frustration there, just stomping. Oh, yeah. Just massive shunt of oversteer, I think. In the final corner, tries to correct for it, loses the rear end, and once that happens, he's just sliding off that final corner towards the barrier that's on the left-hand side of the track. And it's not the biggest shunt in the world, but once you've got the car skipping across the gravel, you're damaging the underside of that car. And then you can see the left-hand side of the side pod crushed in as well. So Logan has to lose his drive next year. It's looking more and more likely, isn't it? Was he quick as well? No, not really. Well, he was 10th fastest in the middle sector. He was quicker than Alex Albon in the middle sector. But I'm not too sure. And James Vowles talks very well, James Vowles, doesn't he? But he don't know if he can justify that one from Logan Sargent too much. Has Williams announced the driver lineup for next year? Just Alex Albon so far. It is the only seat remaining, is that Logan Sargent seat. Everybody else has been confirmed. So we know that, well, the 2024 grid is looking like it's going to be identical to the 2023 grid, unless Logan Sargent is the driver to go. And I think Williams now are going to have to debate that even more so. Because, again, it's not just the fact that he's not really being overly competitive. It's also the fact that he is now shunting the car quite often. Like, we've seen him have a few accidents over the last few races since the summer break. It makes you wonder if he's kind of pushing it a little bit too much. Like, he knows that his seat is under threat. He knows that the Williams team are competitive enough now that they can probably seduce a driver or two into that Williams role if they wanted to, that was maybe of a slightly higher quality, a slightly higher caliber, that would be able to get points, well, points at all. Logan Sargent, the only driver to have taken part in every Grand Prix so far this year and not yet getting a point on the board. And especially when Liam Lawson comes in, he's only taken part in 3 Grand Prix so far. Obviously, the Japanese Grand Prix will be Liam Lawson's 4th Grand Prix. He's already picked up a couple of points. Starting to look a little bit tricky for Logan Sargent to really justify what he's brought to the Williams team in this season. Especially when Alex Albon's got 21 points as well. I know you can't really compare a rookie to their teammate in the same capacity as you normally can compare 2 teammates. But if you look at, even Lando Norris is pretty close to Oscar Piastri. Those 2 together. So Piastri's been able to come in his rookie season, kind of hit the ground running a little bit. But then he did have that year last year with Alpine, or at least half a year with Alpine, where he's behind the scenes. Just feels like Logan Sargent might have been put in a touch too early. Who else? Lawson. Yeah, Lawson probably is a lone Red Bull driver. They have worked with Red Bull before when they first brought Alex Albon in. I know that Alex Albon's now kind of cut ties with the Red Bull establishment, but they did make a deal with Red Bull to bring Alex Albon in. We got to remember when Alex Albon first was in that Williams, he had the Red Bull logo still on his helmet. So the car going on to the back of the truck. Yeah, we're going to get back underway fairly soon. Logan Sargent's car just being put back. And I don't think there'll be too much damage to any of those barriers there because didn't hit them at ridiculous speed. But again, as I said, once you're on the gravel, your car's bouncing up and down. You can't really do too much. You're just headed into the wall and tyre barrier pretty quick. Felipe Drugovich is also, a really good option. It's worth having a look, actually, at some of those younger drivers and whether anybody would be offered. I imagine Teo Pourchaire would also get offered to Williams. Just because Sauber have decided to keep Bottas and Joe for one more season. Have Teo as the reserve driver once again. But maybe Pourchaire would be offered up to the Williams team for a possible seat next year. It depends whether Williams want to go for another rookie or if they sort of think, actually, if you look at the constructors, right, we're high enough in the constructors, 7th place. If we really want to try and push on, if they want to try and catch up to an Alpine, it's going to be really, really difficult. And if they have that kind of aspiration going into 2024 and they think they can build a car quick enough in 2024 that they can go forwards in the constructor standings, they need a driver that's going to get points very, very consistently. Like maybe even more consistently than Alex Albon. Alex Albon's getting them as regularly as you'd imagine the Williams car can get. So they might try and entice like a really big name driver. Can someone remind me who gets knocked out in Q1, please? Just the bottom 5. So if you look at the graphic that is very kindly brought to us by Multiviewer hat in the background. But yeah, if you look at the graphic, the bottom 5, so you can see Valtteri Bottas is this kind of red color across. That means those 5 are going to drop out. Well, now 4 because Logan Sargent didn't manage to set a flying lap time before crunching into the barriers. So 4 drivers now to join him at this moment in time. It's Bottas, Hülkenberg, Albon and Gasly. Although, as you can see, from Charles Leclerc down, we didn't actually see any full laps completed from those drivers. Stroll, currently the slowest of the drivers to have completed a lap. Lawson, 12th place. Magnussen, 11th place. Joe, looking okay. 10th place there, not terribly slow. Although you'd imagine that Leclerc and Sainz will definitely jump a little bit higher than that. Just got to get yourself into the top 15 if you want to take part in Q2. Verstappen and Norris currently setting the standard at the top. Norris quickest in the first sector. Verstappen quickest in the second and third sectors, although that does alternate to those two taking up the first and second spot in every single sector. Then it's a little bit of a mix. Oscar Piastri, third quickest in the first sector. George Russell, third quickest in the second sector. Sergio Perez, third quickest in the third sector. So maybe we're seeing that the McLaren really quick in the first sector in particular. And then Mercedes kind of come to life a little bit, or at least George Russell comes to life a little bit towards the second half of this track. Hakkinen finally comes back from his sabbatical. A slight doubt in my mind. I think it would be very interesting if he did. I'd be very interested in what kind of standard he would be able to set. Oh, and there's the other Williams of Alex Albon. And actually, Alex Albon dipped his rear left tyre in the gravel there. So that's going to be a lot of gravel on that soft compound tyre, and that's really not what you want if you're Alex Albon and you're trying to get through to Q3 in what is showing to be a tricky to drive Williams this weekend, especially from the point of view of Logan Sargent. That car has been delivered back to the Williams garage by the looks of things. Williams mechanics assessing the damage done by Logan Sargent. And we are going to get back underway. The track is clear. And I'm hoping that we're going to get some cars back on track fairly soon. Max Verstappen, just showing in that graphic as we can see through the S's, as I mentioned. So that first sector, Lando Norris the quickest, and then Max Verstappen just has the edge a little bit in the straight line speed advantage in those slower corners. Mick Schumacher or Liam Lawson to replace Logan Sargent. I think that is a good shout. Mick Schumacher in particular is being linked quite heavily now. I think because Toto Wolff is trying to strong arm James Vowles into giving Mick Schumacher a chance in that Williams slot. But I don't know if Mick Schumacher, would he be, he would be better than Logan Sargent, but would he be what Williams really need right now, which is a driver that can pick up points fairly consistently, even in a car that isn't going to be in that kind of top, like you have to be in the top 5 quickest cars realistically to pick up points, right? That's how it works. If you're in the top 5 quickest cars, you're guaranteed to get yourself in the points. It's only when someone in one of the top 5 cars messes up a little bit that they then drop out of the points, and maybe the 6th or 7th quickest car can actually pick up some points on a weekend. So Williams often find themselves in that position where they're 5th fastest at best and kind of 7th, 8th fastest at worst at this moment in time. So they kind of have to have a combination of drivers that are massively outperforming the car plus a little bit of luck to pick up points. Like Alex Albon has been absolutely outperforming the car. And then also he's had a little bit of luck here and there. I do have a question for you. Should Aston Martin do to Lance Stroll? They should get rid of him. In terms of the performances that we've seen this season and comparing them to Fernando Alonso, and also just comparing them to the rest of the grid. Like, we're getting to the point now, if we look at the constructor standings super quickly, because I know that we're going to get back underway with qualifying in about 30 seconds. If we look at it, Lance Stroll is in 9th place. He's 50 points behind Lando Norris. And the McLaren car has only really come to life in the second half of the season. Although Lando Norris has picked up quite a lot of podiums. So maybe you can kind of say, okay, Lando Norris probably would have got ahead of Lance Stroll, however good Lance Stroll would have been in that Aston Martin. But then, Gasly, Piastri, Ocon. You can't say that the Alpine has been anywhere close to the Aston Martin on average this season. And yet, I think Gasly and Ocon are both going to finish ahead of Lance Stroll. And Oscar Piastri as well. Like, I see this whole trio getting ahead of Lance Stroll. Alex Albon, no, too far now for the Williams to be able to catch up. But Lance Stroll just, for huge chunks of this season, hasn't performed. Lance had moments of brilliance followed by long periods of subpar performances. Exactly. That's his career summed up to a T. Like, we see, like, everyone goes back to that pole position that he got in Turkey. But that was just once. Like, he's taken part in, it must be over 100 Grand Prix now, Lance Stroll. And there's one that people talk about, maybe 2 that people talk about as, like, really, really solid weekends. The rest of the time, it's like, yeah, he was there. But he's been so difficult. Here we go, then. We are back underway. We have 7 minutes in the session left to go. So more than enough time for these drivers to do a couple of flying laps if they'd like to. Started strong considering his broken wrist. I think he just started strong because everyone else was quite slow. As soon as it became competitive in any manner, As soon as there was, any kind of Ferrari, Mercedes, anywhere in the mix, I just think he's kind of folded a little bit. At least Fernando Alonso kept it going until kind of Canada, you would say. Like, Fernando Alonso is still getting the best of that Aston Martin car, but was still, right in the mix up until Canada, was still picking up podiums up until Canada, whereas Lance Stroll has not picked up any podiums this season. Whereas we've seen Alpines on the podium, and they have not looked anywhere close to the pace of the Aston Martin again, on average over the course of the season. And yet Gasly and Ocon, I think, will finish ahead of Lance Stroll in the standings. We're now seeing the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, not a scintillating first sector from Charles Leclerc. That puts him 5th fastest in the first sector alone. Carlos Sainz is about to complete the first sector, also pretty slow from the Ferrari through that first sector in comparison to the drivers that they'd like to be in the mix with. The Ferrari looking like the 3rd fastest car in that first sector, with Leclerc and Sainz 5th and 7th respectively. Let's see what Leclerc can do in the second sector. See, now Charles Leclerc quicker in the second sector, only a 10th off Max Verstappen in that second sector. And Carlos Sainz also slots in 4th. So it seems like Ferrari have set up a little bit more for that second sector in particular. Charles Leclerc comes across the line, goes 3rd fastest. And Carlos Sainz is going to be the next driver to complete a lap. And just a little bit off his teammate. 5th fastest for Carlos Sainz. Considering Carlos has really clicked up a gear since the summer break and has been showing that maybe he could be considered that number 1 at Ferrari. We always talk about Charles Leclerc as the number 1 driver. Carlos Sainz trying to do his best to show what he can do, although heavy links to the Audi project. Carlos Sainz. Audi trying to look for that kind of one driver to build the team around come 2026, and Carlos Sainz is said to be high up on the list of drivers that they would be willing to do that for and build their team around. Lance needs to go, given how long he's been in Formula 1 now too. That's the thing, right? It must be more than 100 Grand Prix. Maybe even nearing like 150 Grand Prix for Lance Stroll. He's been around for a very, very long time. You've got to remember, he came in at Williams a very long time ago. Second best for the first few races. Exactly. And that was the only time we really saw any performances from Lance Stroll. Like, he finished, 4th in Australia? I want to say that must be his highest finish. Has he come 4th again at any point? I think he's got 1 4th place in Australia. I think it's his best performance so far this season. As we're starting to see a real queue in the pit lane. Lots of drivers kind of section themselves out. Oh my goodness me. So much traffic indeed. Lewis Hamilton on the radio. A little complaint from Lewis on the amount of traffic. I don't think you should be too worried. Currently 9th fastest. I mean, does need to improve, does Lewis Hamilton, in the incredible helmet that he's got on this weekend. It's kind of chrome with a gold stripe down the middle. Very much worth a Google if you haven't seen Lewis Hamilton's helmet this weekend. Liam Lawson jumping in front of Lewis Hamilton in the pit lane. Everyone trying to find a little bit of a gap if they can. And again, we're looking for 4 drivers to join Logan Sargent in the bottom 5. Lawson needs a seat next year. He definitely deserves one, doesn't he? I think in 4 performances, he's kind of... Especially if he... Again, this is the thing. I think we've had such a poor level of rookie in the last few seasons. Kind of 20 2019 onwards, like if you look at 2020, 21, 22, 23, then if you look at the rookies that we've had in the last 3 or 4 years, most of them have just been like bland at best, I would say, which is maybe quite harsh, but I think, you're looking at Joe being okay, Mick being just below okay, and apart from that, it's like Nick DeVries, meh, Logan Sargent, meh, Latifi, Mazepin. It's like, none of these drivers inspire me. Oscar Piastri has been the one. And I feel like Liam Lawson has been the second coming of like, oh yeah, rookies can actually be good. Like Oscar Piastri has proved rookies can be good again. And I think Liam Lawson's come in and reminded us as well, like, oh yeah, rookies can be all right when it comes to Formula One. You don't need just experienced drivers. You can actually bring a rookie in and they be decent. Points in his third F1 race ever, second in Super Formula. Very true. Although I think like it makes sense. Like, it's a bit weird, isn't it? Like if Liam Lawson was offered that AlphaTauri seat, he'd not be able to finish the Super Formula season because I do think there is a crossover there, and also the team wouldn't risk him in Super Formula just in case of injury and stuff. Like they wouldn't risk him going to another race series. It's why you don't see like drivers midway through the season, like during the summer break, you're not allowed to go and do some rallying for a bit, or something like that. Like when you're signed up to a Formula One contract, there's lots of things you're not really allowed to do just to keep yourself nice and safe and make sure that you're not gonna snap your wrists, Lance Stroll. I think it comes back to one that came up recently was Manuel Neuer. I know it's a football reference and people might not get it, but basically he, in his contract, had many sports and things that he wasn't allowed to do whilst he was still playing professional football. But he decided to go skiing, which was one of the things literally on the list of things not allowed. And then he broke, I think, his arm, and then couldn't take part in the football season for a year. So Yuki Tsunoda jumps up into the 7th place on his home Grand Prix. I'd like to see Yuki Tsunoda get through to Q3 in his home Grand Prix, maybe get some points on the board after a couple of races that really haven't gone his way, but also haven't been his fault. Taken out by Sergio Perez last time out in Singapore. Car gave up on the formation lap in Monza, so there's not too much that Yuki Tsunoda has been able to do. Lando Norris is still fastest in the first sector. Liam Lawson, by the way, has just gone 4th fastest, and he was 3rd fastest in the second and third sectors, was Liam. Lewis Hamilton, only 10th fastest in the Mercedes, was worried about the traffic. It will be good enough to get through, you'd imagine. Alex Albon, especially now, jumps into 12th place. That has put Fernando Alonso at a little bit of risk. But Lance Stroll, oh my God, they're on the debate of Lance Stroll, I've just realised he's in 17th place. Is Lance Stroll. Oh, and Valtteri Bottas goes wide. Oh, it's Joe Guan Yu. Joe Guan Yu. Oh, Joe Guan Yu complaining about Lewis Hamilton there and Hamilton's position. How bad do you think the 2000s reject driver was? Who are my top 5 best Formula 1 drivers from the 2000s onwards? Oh my God. Oh, that is a very tricky question. I mean, it's very easy to just go for the world champions, isn't it? Schumacher, Hamilton, Vettel, Verstappen, Alonso. That's a pretty decent top 5, isn't it? They're all pretty up there. Bottas, Stroll, Hulkenberg, and Joe then join Logan Sargent in the bottom 5. Verstappen still quickest, Lando Norris second. Liam Lawson, though, very impressive 4th fastest, especially when Yuki Tsunoda's down in 8th right now. But Q2 is indeed going to be fairly juicy. I think this could be really competitive, this Q2 session. We've kind of lost... I don't know, actually. Would we have expected... I guess we expect one of the Hasses to be there. Normally it is Kevin Magnussen, who hasn't quite clicked with the Haas car come qualifying. But Nico Hulkenberg being the driver this time around in the Haas car that misses out. Bottas and Joe, the Alfa Romeo, just not quite clicking with this Japanese track. You also assume that one of the Alfa Romeos, again, will be down there at some point. And then Lance Stroll, the driver, to join them after a poor lap from Lance Stroll, it has to be said. Not a bad first sector. Really quick first sector, actually. Now I'm looking at the breakdown. Lance Stroll, 5th fastest in the first sector. And then 19th fastest in the second and third sector. It's a very short third sector, though. So what I try and look at is the first sector and second sector in particular. So you kind of got the first sector, high speed. You've got the S's, really nailing those apexes in the kind of medium high speed corners. And then the second sector is more slow speed. You've got the Degner right-handers, you've got the hairpin, you've got the spoon. Like, the second sector is more about downforce and getting drive off those slow speed corners. So they're the two I kind of try and break down. And then, as you can see, the third sector is effectively, well, it's the 130R, although in these modern Formula 1 cars, the 130R is literally flat. So basically a straight as we go from the spoon up through the third sector. And then the chicane, the only real test in the third sector. Oh, well, Logan Sargent would argue that also the final corner is quite tricky. And then straight down. So the third sector is more about straight line speed. And also it's so short. It's about 18 seconds. So where's the other two? Ooh, Lance Stroll being told to stay in the car just in case there are deleted lap times. And actually somebody does manage to go through. There are quite a few drivers that were pushing the limits. Do you consider the likes of Julian Palmer and Esteban Gutierrez as bad drivers? I mean, they're not like... Palmer, yeah. Gutierrez, probably also, yeah. They were never gonna, break some records or anything like that. They were never horrendously bad either. Well, they had their moments. I'd have to really sit down and think about it. What are my thoughts of the new tyre format? F1 tried a few races back with Q1, Q2, 3, hard, medium, soft. I do like the fact that it saves a few tyres over the course of the weekend. I think that, again, Formula 1 should be moving towards making it more difficult for the teams in terms of tyre compounds. Because at the moment, even though they have a restricted number of sets, they still have more than enough over the course of the weekend to mean that they don't really test themselves that much. Like, they don't actually have to worry about what tires they're using when very much. But then the problem also is if you take away too many tire sets, they just won't use them in free practice. They'll just hold on to the tires as much as they possibly can, and we'll just see drivers like not taking part in free practice in the same way that we do now. We'll just see them going for like longer runs, maybe the occasional run on a soft compound tire right at the end if they've got enough. But We just won't see them use the tyres in the same way over the course of the weekend. So it's kind of finding that strange balance between giving them not quite enough tyres to make it actually logistically difficult to arrange what tyres use and when, but giving them enough tyres that they still take part in the second and third free practice sessions. Q2 now underway. 30 seconds of it gone. 15 minutes of track time for the drivers. And Max Verstappen is the first driver to come out of the pits. We are indeed into Q2. F1 would save more tyres if they didn't bring a wet compound every weekend. It's very true. It's very, very true. I assume they just bring the same wet tyres to basically every weekend. Like, obviously, the softs and mediums and hards, the ones that are used by the teams, they get recycled. They just can't be used again. The rubber degrades so much because of how much temperature and how much force these cars put through the tyres. The rubber just disintegrates and it can't be used again. So the tyres are recycled after each Grand Prix. But the wet tyres, because they don't see any use, I imagine it's just like the same set of wet tyres that are carted around the globe to every single Grand Prix. Alex Albon. Track evolution is going well for Alex Albon. So Alex Albon wanting to push a little bit more. Having Stroll stay in the car because they aren't going to let him back in. Yeah. Just take it in, Lance. Enjoy it while it lasts. Here we go then. Max Verstappen is going to get us underway with the first flying lap of this Q2 session. 12 and a half minutes left to go. We're going to see drivers coming out once again. I'd imagine quite a bit of traffic towards the end of this session once again because, as Alex Albon said, the track evolution looking quite good. Getting a lot quicker as the weekend progresses and laying down a lot of tyre rubber as we go through these qualifying sessions. Do I think we should do something about the wet tyres? It's not the tyres' fault at this moment in time that we can't really race on the wet. It's the diffuser and the floor configurations of a lot of these modern Formula 1 cars because they tried using like mud guards or like splash guards at Silverstone. They ran a trial for the guards on the tyres, and it did reduce the spray from the tyres quite considerably, but the amount of spray coming from the diffuser is still a problem. So at the moment, there's no way of the teams changing the diffuser configuration for the wet races or for when it rains and making them able to actually race in the wet. Verstappen, a 129.9 and kind of setting the standard. Alex Albon comes across the line second quickest. Does Alex Albon after that flying lap from the Williams. Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz on their flying laps too. Charles Leclerc coming around to the middle sector, just completes it. Looking okay from Charles Leclerc. Both sectors green for him, nothing purple as of yet, although Max Verstappen setting pretty quick first flying lap. Charles Leclerc is gonna second fastest from Charles Leclerc, not too bad. But 0.5 of a second off Max Verstappen. And Carlos Sainz, I really hope that was a second reset lap because that is Not the kind of time that we'd like to see from Carlos Sainz. Over a second off the pace of Max Verstappen. 1.1 seconds off the pace of Max Verstappen. Lawson looking competitive once again. Going around. Lewis Hamilton just does not look comfortable in that Mercedes. Wasn't a vintage Q1 session from Lewis Hamilton. Just about snuck through into Q2. Ooh. Charles Leclerc is possibly looking at a grid penalty for not following the steward's instructions. I don't know what about in particular. I imagine something to do with the Logan Sargent red flag. Russell quicker than Lewis, but both not ridiculously competitive as well. Slotting behind Carlos Sainz, 1.1 seconds and 1.2 seconds off the pace. Russell and Hamilton. Ocon and Gasly also slotting in. Sergio Perez goes second fastest, although Sergio Perez on a fresh set of soft compound tyres and 0.3 off Max Verstappen. Still, Yuki Tsunoda, hello, goes third fastest. Also on a fresh set of softs was Yuki. But jumps up into third place, drops Alex Albon of the drivers that has completed a flying lap into the bottom 5. Fernando Alonso comes across the line and goes 9th fastest, trying to sneak his Aston Martin through. The lone Aston Martin out there right now. Kevin Magnussen is also all on his own at Haas, although yet to see a lap from Kevin. Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris jump into second and third place on some fresh rubber as well. So there's a few kind of mixes here. Verstappen, his lap time was on a used set of softs, which doesn't bode well for when he does put on a fresh set of tyres. Later on in the session, if he bothers to put on a fresh set of soft compound tyres, Max Verstappen, so quick already. Oh, and George Russell kicking up the dust in the Mercedes car. Yuki Tsunoda now 5th fastest behind the Red Bulls and McLaren. So currently putting the AlphaTauri. Some AlphaTauri fans in the stands, of course, for Yuki Tsunoda this weekend. So there we have it then. Alonso, Ocon, Gasly, Albon and Magnussen, the 5 drivers that need to improve. We actually didn't see Kevin Magnussen put together a flying lap. Oh, Gasly on the radio felt something between his feet in the cockpit. And that's not something that you want to see from a Formula 1 driver. Just a random rogue item in your pedal box. Especially if it gets caught underneath one of the pedals and restricts, well, first and foremost, ruins your lap time if you can't brake and accelerate when you want to. And then at the extreme end could cause you to fall apart and possibly hit into a barrier or two if you can't slow down for the corners in time. Lando Norris, as soon as they're done with you, they can fire them back up. So Lando Norris will be going out again. Liam Lawson, the man under pressure right now. There's something loose between my legs, apart from the obvious. Oh, one of the better Formula One quotes, to be fair. Poor Sebastian. Is there this weekend. Sebastian Vettel is celebrating his biodiversity movement at the Japanese Grand Prix. The second corner. If you look at turn 2, you get the opportunity to watch a replay or anything. Turn 2, the the curbs at turn 2 are yellow and black as opposed to red and white this weekend for Sebastian Vettel and his movement. McLaren really fast in the first sector. They are dominating the first sector, the McLaren. Lando Norris quickest in the first sector still of anybody. Just Verstappen with the edge when it comes to the second and third sector. So it does feel like kind of those faster, medium speed corners the McLaren is set up for this weekend. And then the higher downforce, hairpin, spoon corners. Maybe a little bit trickier for the McLaren setup. But still boding well for a McLaren front row start in some way or another. Probably alongside Max Verstappen. 3 minutes left to go. And again, we see the traffic in the pit lane from the drivers. And everybody just trying to find a space for themselves. Letting the other driver disappear up the road just a touch. Must be so strange to drive these Formula One cars as slow as they do through the pit lane. Kevin Magnussen, no time set so far. Currently see him coming through the hairpin in the middle sector. And up towards the spoon corner. I do miss Vettel and Raikkonen, if I'm honest. I feel like they were a generation-defining pair, weren't they? It was kind of Raikkonen, Vettel, Hamilton, Alonso, you could say. Kind of those drivers of that generation. Oh, Oscar Piastri has come to a stop down at the Red Bull garage by the looks of things. I mean, he should be through. Oscar Piastri is currently second fastest of anybody. But he's come down the pits. Maybe they think he's safe? And they want to save the set of tyres for Alex Albon? For Oscar Piastri? Sorry, I was looking at Alex Albon's time. But maybe they think Piastri's safe? I really hope there's not an issue there. I saw F1 Checkered Flag channel the picture of Sergeant Crash. Yeah, it was a heavy crash considering that corner. But again, I think it looks heavier because once you're on the grass and gravel, there's just nothing you can do, and you're not really slowing down too much either. You're just kind of skipping across the gravel until you hit into the barriers. Hamilton now in 10th place, the driver in trouble. Magnussen on his way around. 2 personal bests for Kevin Magnussen in the first and second sector. Goes 9th fastest. So Magnussen trying to be the sole Haas to get through into Q3. Normally Nico Hulkenberg that does it. And normally does sneak through just about in 10th place. Although can't see that happening for Kevin Magnussen this time around. And there it is. Drops down into 11th place. As Fernando Alonso only comes across the line 9th quickest. We've got Lawson jumping up into 10th. I don't think that's going to be quick enough for Liam this time around, unfortunately. Although Alex Albon is going to drop out in the Williams. Ocon looking to improve in the Alpine. No, only goes 12th fastest. So Ocon isn't going to get through either. We've got Russell and Gasly left to go. As to whether Liam Lawson is going to be able to get through into his second Q3 in 2 weekends. George Russell comes across the line, goes 7th fastest, and is good enough. Sorry, 7th fastest. I know Yuki Tsunoda then comes across the line, takes 7th fastest from George Russell. So it's Pierre Gasly currently in 15th. And is Pierre Gasly going to be able to improve enough? No, he is not. So it's going to be Lawson, Gasly, Albon, Ocon, and Magnussen. Our bottom 5 from Q2. And we have Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez. Lewis Hamilton went through in 4th fastest. Not bad from the Mercedes at all. Carlos Sainz 5th. Oscar Piastri, Yuki Tsunoda. George Russell, Lando Norris ended up 9th fastest in that session. And also Fernando Alonso, just about does Fernando Alonso make it through. Liam Lawson very close. We'll start 11th tomorrow. Definitely points available to you from 11th place. Especially with Fernando Alonso in front. Fernando Alonso had a terrible Singapore Grand Prix, and if that continues, then you'd imagine Liam Lawson, well, is first in the queue to pick up some points. Verstappen, Piastri, and Norris, though, saving a set of tyres there and deciding not to go out for the second run. Norris a little bit on edge, I would imagine, as he came through in 9th place. Especially if Pierre Gasly would have been able to hook up a little bit more of a lap towards the end there. Lando Norris maybe a little bit twitchy in the garage, but does make it through into the top 10. So just to confirm, Liam Lawson, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, Esteban Ocon, and Kevin Magnussen, the 5 drivers knocked out in that Q2 session. We then had Bottas, Stroll, Hulkenberg, and Zhou Guanyu, who were not quick enough in Q1. Logan Sargent causing the red flag in Q1 and not setting a time at all in qualifying so far this weekend after coming to a stop. And we'll start from 20th place, possibly the pit lane, depending on how much damage has been done to that Williams car. What car would have to put Max in for him to not win the Drivers' Championship? I think, it is a combination. I've heard a lot of drivers, I think, was it Esteban Ocon? I want to say Esteban Ocon said in an interview that if, you put the drivers in machinery that was equal, it would be very close. Like, the whole field would probably be within 3 or 4 tenths of each other pretty much every single time around. If they were all in the same machinery, that's the kind of caliber of driver that you're looking at. It makes sense. These are 20 of the best drivers that there are. So it makes sense that they all have fairly similar caliber of driving. And it is just the millimeters that would make the difference if they were all in the same car. So I feel like even if you put Verstappen in maybe a Mercedes, I don't know if it would, it wouldn't have been this comfortable by any stretch of the imagination. He's had an exceptional season, don't get me wrong. But I do feel like it would have been a pretty tough ask for Verstappen to win the championship in that Mercedes car. And that Mercedes car's on average, statistically, if we look at the constructor standing, the second quickest. So I do feel like the field is a lot closer together than you expect. What are we looking at? Only ones I can name: Kimi, Charles, and Italian Jesus. Oh, who are the worst Sauber / Alfa Romeo drivers? Interesting. Mercedes team looking up and down, debating where to go with their strategy. Lewis was all right in the first sector. George Russell slow in the first sector in comparison. But George Russell really quick in the second and third sectors this weekend. So looking like George Russell has found his groove when it comes to that middle sector in particular. Second quickest time set, actually, by George Russell in the second sector. Only Charles Leclerc quicker. But it's all going to come down to this, isn't it? Teams, the tyres, set up as fast as they possibly can, as low fuel as you can possibly get away with, and going for 2 flying laps, you'd imagine, in the 12 minutes we're going to have in this Q3 session. Very close to getting underway. Be interesting to see who comes out first, as we are seeing, as Alex Albon said over the radio, a little bit of track evolution, getting quicker and quicker. Although Alex Albon won't be able to take advantage of that anymore. Dropped out during Q2 with Lawson and Gasly, Ocon and Magnussen also joining him. Carlos Sainz, only 5th fastest for Carlos in that Q2 session. Obviously looking for another pole position, looking for another victory this weekend. Second victory in Formula 1 picked up last weekend in Singapore. Can he duplicate, go back to back? Or will Max Verstappen be back once again? His 10 race winning streak brought to an end last week in Singapore. Couldn't make it 11. But I'm sure he'd be more than happy to start another winning streak this weekend in Japan. Despite not being able to watch the 80s or 90s, more exciting at those times? I could not tell you, to be honest. I have watched very little 80s and 90s Formula 1. I only ever watch it if I'm doing like research on a particular driver or two. I will watch a few of their like either highlight or low light races, and I'll watch various clips and bits and pieces of them. Can't say I've gone back and watched like any full seasons of 80s or 90s. Why are Aston Martin struggling now? They just haven't been able to keep up with the upgrade kind of war, I guess. So they came into the season second fastest. They made a slight error in their upgrades, or at least they said the upgrades didn't quite go as planned when they brought an upgrade in Canada. And it feels like since then, they've kind of been on the back foot a little bit. And yeah, they just haven't been able to keep up with the relentless numbers of upgrades that Mercedes and Ferrari have been able to bring over the course of the season. The Japanese flags are waving as Yuki Tsunoda takes to the track at his home Grand Prix. What can he do in that AlphaTauri? He'll be looking to bounce back. Has been confirmed for the 2024 season now in that AlphaTauri car. But after a couple of races where he's been outshone by Liam Lawson, I feel like he'll definitely want to bounce back and show that he is the driver for AlphaTauri moving forward into the future. Pick a driver for pole. If you're wrong, you got to like and subscribe. Love that, Mike. Appreciate that, Mike. Piastri. Piastri is a good outside shout, you know. Lando Norris, though, surely would be the McLaren pick. Just more consistency from Lando Norris. 10 minutes to go in this Japanese Grand Prix qualifying. And once again, it's going to be Max Verstappen who sets the standard as he has across the entire season, really. One blip in Singapore, not bringing the Red Bull team down. Obviously, their win streak as well. Red Bull, what was it, 16 races in a row that Red Bull had won, either through Max Verstappen or Sergio Perez. That also came to an end in Singapore. Carlos Sainz putting just the smallest blemish on the Red Bull season. But I don't think you can take away from the brilliance that Red Bull have shown this year so far. And Max Verstappen ready to show that brilliance once more here in Japan. A really good first sector from Max Verstappen. Goes quickest in the first sector once again of anybody of any session so far. Huge G-forces pulled by Max Verstappen through the spoon as he finishes that second sector and comes onto the third. The 130R almost flat, completely flat in the Red Bull. And then down to the chicane, the final real challenge before then getting back on the throttle once again. Driving the car around the final corner, rush to the line. And a 1:29 dead from Max Verstappen is the time that is set, is the standard that he has set for the rest of the field. Sergio Perez, second quickest. Lewis Hamilton, third, until Oscar Piastri comes across the line and goes 1:29.4 for the McLaren. So still 0.4 off of Max Verstappen now. Lando Norris is going to be the next McLaren to come across the line, but it's only third fastest, 0.04 of a second off the pace is Lando Norris. So it's Verstappen, Piastri, Norris, our podium places so far. Is the hairpin turn the cause of the 40-50 second times in Sector 2? Yes, yeah. Sector 2 is just slower in general, to be honest. The Degner right-handers right at the beginning of the sector are very tricky to get right. And then, yeah, the hairpin, obviously, the cars have to slow down a considerable amount for that hairpin. And then the spoon corner as well. Spoon, high lateral G for the driver. We saw 5G pulled by Max Verstappen through the spoon corner as well. So it's a more technical middle sector. Is technical the right word? Because the S's in the first sector are also very, very difficult to nail. But a very tricky middle sector with some slow speed corners that you have to absolutely get spot on if you want to find that. How much has Sargent shunts cost Williams this season? I don't have a figure, but it's starting to add up. Specifically since the summer break as well. Just feels like there's been a few more shunts than there were beforehand. George Russell, also since the summer, has been very impressive. A third place in the Netherlands. Fourth place in Monza. And qualified second as well last time out in Singapore. So George Russell's been very impressive in qualifying. On his out lap, George Russell. So going to go for his lap early. Considering how far behind their infrastructure is as compared to the other teams, when does Williams pull the plug? Logan's in such a weird position. It's so difficult to say with Logan Sargent. Like, he hasn't done well. He's got 0 points. He's starting to cause damage to the car. But then on the flip side, he is their driver. They do believe in him moving forwards. They might not have that many other options that are viable for them. Because again, they only have so much that they can really spend, and they need the money from sponsorships and various people as well. Logan Sargent does bring at least like an American tag to the team. George Russell improves in the first sector, improves on his own time, but still not quick in the first sector, George Russell. In fact, that is the 14th quickest first sector of anybody so far we've seen this afternoon. So not a vintage first sector from George Russell by any stretch of the imagination. And George Russell coming through the middle sector then is where he's kind of shone so far this weekend. Can he improve in the second sector as well? Yes, he can. A little bit of an improvement from George Russell in that middle sector. But I don't think this is going to be anything crazy in terms of lap time. I still think we're going to be quite a distance off Max Verstappen. 4th fastest from George Russell, as everybody else is coming out of the pit lane to start their final flying laps. Why was Callum Ilott not in Formula 1? Yeah, that's very true. He was linked to Formula 1 quite heavily. I just think he was, again, one of those drivers that came through at just the wrong time. Didn't have the financial backing of some of the other drivers that were on the or available to be on the grid. Yeah, Callum Ilott, I think, got a little bit unlucky. Was constantly talked about as a possible driver to come through, but never quite clicked anywhere in particular. Charles Leclerc, of course, qualified 3rd in Singapore, got a little bit done over by the safety car coming when it did and hitting a little bit of traffic in the pit lane. But a podium was maybe on the cards for Charles Leclerc. He was quite slow towards the end though, wasn't he? And overtaken by both the Mercedes cars, so it would have been tricky. Charles Leclerc to hold on to a podium. I think he'll be trying, though, to outscore Carlos Sainz this weekend, who is the sole Ferrari to win a Grand Prix this year. He's kind of shown up his teammate just a touch. 2.5 minutes left to go in this Q3 session then. Let's see what Charles Leclerc can do in his Ferrari. Why hasn't Robert Schwartzman ever come up? I just don't think he's good enough. Just don't think he's quite ever shown that he can really do it on track for Ferrari. But yeah, he does an amazing work for Ferrari in the sim. So they just kind of keep him around as a reserve test. You know, like some drivers, they do just have a knack for simulator work. Maybe Schwartzman's just one of those where Ferrari he is so good for us in the simulator that we can't really afford to get rid of him at any point. Max Verstappen improves on his first sector time by a 10th. As you can see, there goes purple in that first sector. And it's looking like it's going to be the Max Verstappen show. He's probably going to put it on pole position once again to bounce back from a poor Singapore Grand Prix. The current world champion. 1 minute left to go in this. The checker flag about to drop. Although a lot of drivers already on their final flying laps and are not going to be able to go again even if they don't hit the checkered flag. Why Felipe Drugovich wasn't in Formula 1? Yeah, he's also got a little bit unlucky, hasn't he? Kind of come through one Formula 2. But again, I feel like the thing with Felipe Drugovich was that he didn't have a team backing him. If Felipe Drugovich was a Red Bull driver, he'd have probably been able to push on a little bit. But Aston Martin picked him up. That is phenomenal from Max Verstappen, a 128.8. That is going to be almost impossible for drivers to beat, especially as Charles Leclerc comes across the line 4th fastest. Oscar Piastri has actually gone quite slow in the middle sector, and so has Lando Norris gone quite slow in the middle sector. So both of the McLaren's looking unlikely to improve on their times too much. There is Piastri across the line, doesn't. Norris also doesn't. So Verstappen is going to be on pole. It's going to be Piastri and Norris just behind. Yuki Tsunoda as well there to jump up into 7th. Although Sergio Perez, 5th fastest for the Red Bull of Sergio Perez. Hamilton is going to come across the line as well and go 7th quickest, Lewis Hamilton. Not too bad at all. Out-qualifies George Russell. And Hamilton was talking earlier on the weekend about his qualifying and how he hasn't been happy with his qualifying this year. But much better from him. And the Red Bull team celebrates another pole position from Max Verstappen. So there is our top 10 rounded up. Verstappen, Piastri, and Norris will start in the podium positions come tomorrow's Grand Prix. We've got Leclerc just behind the Ferrari. The Red Bull of Sergio Perez in 5th place. Sainz just behind in 6th place. Then Hamilton and Russell will line up side by side on the 4th row of the grid in 7th and 8th. Yuki Tsunoda in 9th. 10th place, it's Fernando Alonso. And starting in the points. And then the drivers that missed out in Q2, Liam Lawson, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon. Esteban Ocon is also in there, and Kevin Magnussen. Those 5 will start 11th through 15th. Just outside of the points positions, Lawson, the possibility of back-to-back points finishes in Formula 1 in his 3rd and 4th races in Formula 1. Just outside there in 11th. Although just outdone by his teammate as well, Yuki Tsunoda. And then finally, the drivers that dropped out in Q1, Valtteri Bottas, Lance Stroll, Nico Hulkenberg, and Zhou Guanyu. And then, of course, Logan Sargent, who also had a big shunt in his Williams car. We'll have to wait and see whether he starts from the back of the grid or from the pit lane, because there is going to be quite a chunk of damage that needs to be sorted out on that Williams car. But I would like to say thank you for watching. Thank you for joining me very early for you guys in the UK. I know lots of people in the US, Canada, very late for you. Make sure you get some rest now. Make sure you're prepared, because we're going to be back once again to do it all over again come Sunday with Max Verstappen starting on the front row of the grid once again. Pole position for the Red Bull driver, a possibility at World Championship, Constructors Championship trophies being sealed this weekend. Again, they just have to outscore Mercedes and Ferrari. So Verstappen looking like he's going to be able to do it. Oscar Piastri, though, just behind, and Lando Norris. It's going to be interesting to see what the McLarens can do from 2nd and 3rd place. It's just a shame that this wasn't last weekend when Max Verstappen actually let somebody else win, because it's going to be tough for both of those McLarens to make up that position. But there we are. Max Verstappen back once again. Shows that he can still do it in that Red Bull car. And yeah, I'm going to disappear off. Thank you guys so much. Get some rest too. Thank you much, mate. Thank you, Antonio. Appreciate it. And I will see you guys tomorrow for the